Hello, Sycamore. So it's Monday and it's time. You've probably you've not probably worked really hard today. You have worked really hard today because I've seen some of your work that you've already been sent in. It's time for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And if you remember from Friday, this very tiny sort of bit of strip of cardboard, they thought, came out from this giant machine. And it wasn't a strip of cardboard at all. It was a piece of chewing gum. And who was excited about that piece of chewing gum? The most excited of the children about it. That's right. It was Violet Beauregard, the girl who chews gum all day and then takes it out, puts it behind her ear. So chapter 21, Goodbye, Violet. This gum, Mr. Wonka went on, is my latest, my greatest, my most fascinating invention. It's a chewing gum meal. It's that tiny little strip of gum lying there, a whole 3-course dinner all by itself. What sort of nonsense is this? One of the fathers said. My dear sir, cried Mr. Wonka, when I start selling this gum in the shops, it will change everything. It will be the end of all the kitchens and all the cooking. There'll be no more shopping to do, no more buying of meat and groceries. There'll be no knives, no forks needed at mealtimes, no plates, no washing up, no rubbish, no mess, just a little strip of Wonka's magic chewing gum. And that's all you'll ever need. It's all you ever need, actually, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This piece of gum I've just made happens to be tomato soup, roast beef, and blueberry pie. But you can have almost anything you want. What do you mean it's tomato soup, roast beef, and blueberry pie? Said Violet Beauregard. If you were to start chewing it, said Mr. Wonka, then that's exactly what you'd get on the menu. It's absolutely amazing. You can actually feel the food going down your throat and into your tummy, and you can taste it perfectly. And it fills you up, and it satisfies you. It's terrific. That is utterly impossible, said Veruca Salt. Just so long as it's gum, shouted Violet Beauregard, just so long as it's a piece of gum and I can chew it, then that's for me. And quickly she took her own world record piece of chewing gum out of her mouth and stuck it behind her left ear. Come on, Mr. Wonka, she said, hand over this magic gum of yours and we'll see if it works. Now, Violet, said Mrs. Beauregard, her mother, don't let's do anything silly, Violet. I want the gum, Violet said. What's so silly about that? Well, I'd rather you didn't take it, Mr. Wonka told her gently. You see, I haven't quite got the recipe right. There's one or two things. Oh, forget about that, said Violet. And suddenly, before Mr. Wonka could stop her, she shot out her hand and grabbed the stick of gum from the little drawer and popped it straight into her mouth. At once, her huge, well-trained jaws started chewing away on it like a pair of tongs. Don't, said Mr. Wonka. Oh, fabulous, shouted Violet. It's tomato soup. It's hot and creamy and delicious. I can feel it running down my throat. Stop, said Mr. Wonka. The gum isn't ready yet. It's not right. Of course it's right, said Violet. It's working beautifully. What lovely soup this is. Spit it out, said Mr. Wonka. Oh, wait a minute. It's changing, shouted Violet, chewing and grinning at the same time. The second course is coming up. It's roast beef. It's all tender and juicy. Oh, super flavour. Oh, and I love the baked potato. It's got a crispy skin and everything. But how interesting, Violet, said Mrs. Beauregard. You are a clever girl. Keep chewing, baby, said Mr. Beauregard. Keep right on chewing. This is a great day for the Beauregards. Our little girl is the first person in the world to have a chewing gum meal. Everybody was watching Violet Beauregard as she stood there chewing this extraordinary gum. Little Charlie Bucket was staring at her, absolutely spellbound, watching her huge rubbly lips as they pressed and unpressed the chewing gum. And Grandpa Joe stood beside him, gasping at the girl. Mr. Wonka was wringing his hands and saying, No, it's just not ready for eating. It's not right. You mustn't do it. Blueberry pie and cream, shouted Violet. Here it comes. Oh, it's perfect. It's beautiful. It's exactly as though I'm swallowing it. It's as though I'm chewing and swallowing great big spoonfuls of the most marvellous blueberry pie in the whole world. Good heavens, girl, shrieked Mrs. Beauregard, suddenly staring at Violet. What's happening to your nose? Speaking of noses, Dylan has just come right here to listen to the story. Oh, be quiet, Mother, and let me finish, said Violet. It's turning blue, screamed Mrs. Beauregard. Your nose, it's turning blue. Oh, your mother's right, said Mr. Beauregard. Your whole nose has gone purple now. What do you mean? Said Violet, still chewing. Oh, my goodness, your cheeks, screamed Mrs. Beauregard. They're turning blue as well. So's your chin. Your whole face is turning blue. Spit the gum out! Spit it out at once, said Mr. Beauregard. Oh, mercy save us, yelled Mrs. Beauregard. The girl's going blue and purple all over. Even her hair is changing colour. Violet, you're turning violet. What's happening to you? I told you I hadn't got it quite right, sighed Mr. Wonka, shaking his head sadly. I'll say you haven't, cried Mrs. Beauregard. Just look at my girl now. Everybody was staring at Violet, and what a terrible, peculiar sight she was. Her face and her hands and her legs and her neck, in fact the skin all over her body, as well as her great big mop of curly hair, had turned a brilliant purple-blue colour, the colour of blueberry juice. Oh, it always goes wrong when we come to the dessert, sighed Mr. Wonka. It's the blueberry pie that does it. But I'll get it right one day. You wait and see. Violet, screamed Mrs. Beauregard, you're swelling up. Oh, Mum, I feel sick, Violet said. You're swelling up. Oh, I feel very peculiar, gasped Violet. Well, I'm not surprised, said Mr. Beauregard. Great heavens, screeched her mum. You're blowing up like a balloon. Well, more like a blueberry, madam, said Mr. Wonka. Call a doctor, shouted Mr. Beauregard. Prick her with a pin, said one of the other fathers. Save her, Mrs. Beauregard said, wringing her hands. But there was no saving her now. Her body, let me just show you that picture, see if you can see. You'll see that. That's what she's, look at her body, it's all swollen. Her body was swelling up and changing shape at such a rate that within a minute it had turned into nothing less than an enormous round blue ball. A gigantic blueberry, in fact, and all that remained of Violet was a tiny pair of legs and a tiny pair of arms sticking out of the great big round fruit, and her little head on top. Oh, it always happens like that, sighed Mr. Wonka. I've tried 20 times in the tasting room on this, tested it on 20 Oompa Loompas, and every one of them finished up as a blueberry. It's most annoying. I just can't understand it. But I don't want a blueberry for a daughter, yelled Mrs. Beauregard. Put her back to what she was, this instant. Mr. Wonka clicked his fingers, and 10 Oompa Loompas appeared immediately at his side. Roll Miss Beauregard into the boat, he said, and take her along to the juicing room at once. The juicing room? Cried Mrs. Beauregard. What are they going to do to her in there? Squeeze her, said Mr. Wonka. We've got to squeeze the jute out of her immediately. After that, we'll see how she comes out. But don't worry, my dear Mrs. Beauregard. We'll get her repaired if it's the last thing we do. I'm sorry about it all, I really am. Already the 10 Oompa Loompas were rolling the enormous blueberry across the floor of the inventing room towards the door that led to the chocolate river, where the boat was waiting. Mr. and Mrs. Beauregard hurried after them, and the rest of the party, including little Charlie and Grandpa Joe, stood absolutely still and just watched them go. Listen, whispered Charlie. Listen, Grandpa. The Oompa Loompas in the boat outside are starting to sing. And the voices of 100 of them singing together came loud and clear into the room. So there they are, rolling. You see that, rolling Violet. And this was their song. And don't worry, children, I'm not going to sing it. But it's like a poem. Dear friends, we surely all agree there's almost nothing worse to see than some repulsive little bottom who's always chewing gum. It's very near as bad as those who sit around and pick their nose. So please believe us when we say that chewing gum will never pay. This sticky habit's bound to send the chewer to a sticky end. Did any of you know a person called Miss Bigelow? This dreadful woman saw no wrong in chewing all day long. She chewed while bathing in her tub. She chewed while dancing at her club. She chewed in church and on the bus. It really was quite ludicrous. And when she couldn't find her gum, she'd chew up the linoleum, or anything that happened near a pair of boots, a postman's ear, or other people's underclothes. And once she chewed her boyfriend's nose. She went on chewing till at last her chewing muscles grew so vast that from her face her giant chin stuck out like a violin. For years and years she chewed away, consuming 50 bits a day, until one summer's eve, alas, a horrible business came to pass. Miss Bigelow went late to bed. For half an hour she lay and read, chewing and chewing all the while, like some great clockwork crocodile. At last she put her gum away upon a special little tray and settled back and went to sleep. She managed this by counting sheep. But now, how strange, although she slept, those massive jaws of hers still kept on chewing through the night, even with nothing there to bite. They were, you see, in such a groove, they positively had to move, and very grim it was to hear, in pitchy darkness, loud and clear. This sleeping woman's great big trap, opening and shutting, snap, 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 faster and faster, chop, chop, chop. The noise went on. It wasn't stop. Until at last her jaws decide to pause and open extra wide. And with the most tremendous chew, they bit the lady's tongue in two. Therefore, just from chewing gum, Miss Bigelow was always dumb and spent her life shut up in some disgusting sanatorium. And that's why we'll try so hard to save Miss Violet Beauregard from suffering an equal fate. She's still quite young. It's not too late, provided she survives the cure. We hope she does, but we can't be sure. So I wonder what will happen. Chapter 22, tomorrow with Mrs. Jenkins. We haven't got many more chapters to read in the book. So we'll find out whether Violet recovered or whether she stayed looking a bit like a blueberry. Anyway, have a lovely evening, children, and I will see you on Tuesday, tomorrow. Bye-bye.